Good morning. Today we are going to be talking about using the quadratic formula to solve quadratic equations. So this is the quadratic formula. You can find this on your reference sheet if you are taking a New York State Regents exam. And all of these letters, A, B, and C, come from the standard form of a quadratic equation, ax squared plus bx plus c. So our first step is always going to be to identify A, B, and C, of course, as long as it's set equal to 0. Okay? And then when we rewrite this formula, I like to rewrite it with parentheses. So every variable gets a parentheses, and I substitute values into those parentheses. Okay? So let's take a look at number 1. A is equal to 1. B is equal to -4, and C is equal to +3. So I'm going to set up my quadratic formula with the parentheses. So negative parentheses plus or minus the square root of parentheses squared minus 4 parentheses all over 2 parentheses. And then I plug in the values provided. So B goes first, so it's -4. Then b squared, so that's -4 again. A is 1, and c is 3. So I just followed along with the top here. And then 2 times a is 1. So what I like to do now is, because the radical has such an impact on the answer we get, or the type of answer we get, I pull the math for the radical off to the side. So in my graphing calculator, I'm going to type in just what's under the parentheses, under the radical. So parentheses -4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 3, and I get 4. So now that I know I have the square root of 4, I can evaluate that, and if you don't know it by heart, second x squared of 4 is 2. So that wound up evaluating our radical out into an integer. Then I just have to worry about the next 2 sections. Okay, so x equals a -4 is a +4, plus or minus our square root evaluated to 2, and 2 times 1 is 2. So this plus or minus separates our answers into 2 answers, the positive version and the negative version of this symbol. So x equals 4 plus 2 over 2, and x equals 4 minus 2 over 2. So I now have 4, 5, 6 over 2 is 3, and 4 minus 2 is 2 over 2 is 1. These are our solutions. Okay, when you wind up with solutions like this, it's most likely because our original expression was factorable. Okay, but either way, our quadratic formula is always going to work. So let's take a look at example number 2. So for example number 2, A is 2, B is 3, C is -10. Once again, I'm going to set up my quadratic formula with the parentheses. And then I'm going to plug in. So B is 3, B is 3, A is 2, C is -10, and A is 2. So off to the side, I'm going to identify what I wind up with under the radical. So I'm going to have 3 squared minus 4 times 2 times -10, and I get 89. So I attempt to determine the square root of 89, which is an irrational number. So I'm going to leave the square root of 89 as is, because the square root is more accurate than giving myself a decimal. So if I rewrite this, I wind up with negative a positive 3 is -3, plus or minus the square root of 89 over 4. I cannot simplify this any further. You could try to simplify the radical, but I'm going to show that in a separate video at a later date. For right now, we can leave our answer as such. If you'd like to try number 3 and 4 on your own, by all means. Okay, so A is 8, B is 7, C is -8. X equals negative of parentheses plus or minus the square root of parentheses squared minus 4 parentheses parentheses all over 2 parentheses. So plugging in 7, 7, 8, and negative 8 all over 8. My radical comes off to the side. I do what's underneath the radical. That's actually called a discriminant. Okay, 7 squared minus 4 times 8 times negative 8, and I get 305. So I start by writing radical 305, and now I try to evaluate that radical, because you never know. Some numbers like this, we don't know if it has a square root, but it does not. This is also irrational. So I'm going to leave the square root as is and just plug it back into my formula. So negative of positive 7 is negative 7, plus or minus the square root of 305 all over 16. And we're finished. So for number 4, A is 9, B is a positive 4, C is a negative 16. Set up your fraction with the quadratic formula. And plug in. So B is 4, 4, 9, negative 16, all over 9. Pull the radical off to the side. So evaluating what's under the radical, 4 squared minus 4 times 9 times negative 16 is 592. Second x squared of 592, just to see what happens, is also irrational, so I'm going to leave it as is. And I wind up with negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 592 all over 2 times 9, which is 18. All right, and I hope you enjoyed watching a Isaac creation. I will do a follow-up video on how to simplify radicals so that you could give a more more simplified answer, but for right now we're going to leave them just as is, just so you have the feeling of how to plug in and evaluate the radicals and what happens here. All right, hope you enjoyed. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.